My name's Mary Glancy, and I am the Director of the School of Education. And we are delighted to be able to host Mario Basora, who is the Superintendent of Yellow Springs School District, and Dawn Keller, who is the Treasurer. Where's Dawn? Here's Dawn over here. Sorry. Well, I beg your pardon. So Dawn and Mario will be giving a presentation shortly, but what I wanted to do was we do have new leadership at the institution, and as with all things in higher education, things happen and things change and on and on. And I would like to introduce you to our interim president, Dr. Ellen Hall, who wants to say a few words.
Well, it's a pleasure to see all of you here. I don't think I've ever seen as many Yellow Springs people in one place in the whole time I've been here. So I'm just so thrilled that all of you are here tonight and are coming to hear your superintendent and treasurer talk about what's coming up. So I have been here for about 2 years now, and I was vice president for academic affairs for a while, and then July 1st I became president here. And I really love Antioch Midwest. I love Yellow Springs, and I am very happy to host you here because I think that we can have a wonderful partnership, and I really have felt that the whole time I've been here. So I've seen that it's growing and blooming, and I think that's really terrific. I'm also awfully pleased to have someone else that I want to introduce to you tonight. Felice Noodleman is our new chancellor, and she has come from New Jersey here and has been here since July the 1st and is providing inspirational leadership for us in a way that we have not had before, and at least while I've been here. And so I am very excited about what's here in the future for Antioch University Midwest, and to have her presence here in the Dayton area, the Yellow Springs and Dayton area. So without saying very much more, I would like to introduce her, and she has a few words to say to you as well. Thank you. Felice?
Good evening, everyone. How are you all tonight? Well, I'm excited. I'm not really going to take up your time because you have such an important speaker this evening, and that's really why I'm here. I've always been involved with education from the time I started as an adjunct faculty at a college shortly after my graduate degrees, and fell in love with how people learn and what it means to create knowledge and meaning, and what it means to inspire young students, young minds to achieve just amazing things, and to help our society grow and thrive. And so for me, and as I grew throughout my professional career, I always had as a foundation and an anchor the importance of education in our democracy. And, okay? All right. I know the Heimlich, so, right? And throughout my work in both higher education and at the New York Times, we worked with both the New York City schools and schools across the country and entire state systems, and saw what it means when a community comes forward and supports their education system. So I thank you for being here this evening. I thank you for looking at us as a collaborator and a partner, and most of all, a supporter of Yellow Springs and of education. So I think without further ado, I look forward to hearing you speak this evening. Thank you so much.
Kat, do we need a mic, or what do you think? Should I get one just to be safe, or? I'll do it. So you never know. Make sure I turn it on. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. So nice to see everybody here today. So I'll put this here. I don't often wear these, so you can hear me now. I think it's probably this mic that you can hear me. Okay, there we go. Let's see if we got this working now.
Mario, can you introduce yourself?
I will. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mario Basora. I'm the superintendent of schools here in Yellow Springs. Thank you all for being here today. I want to thank a few people today and recognize a few distinguished members in the audience. I want to start by thanking Dr. Glancy. Thank you so much for everything. Where is she at? Oh, thank you so much for everything that you've done. I really appreciate you and Sarah Wallace for setting this up, and a great opportunity for us, for the whole community, to come out and hear us talk about our schools and how they're doing. And so I look forward to a great relationship in the future, working with you and with our schools, and to help student learning grow every day. I also want to thank Dr. Nibbleman for being here tonight. It means a lot to see you here today and be here supporting our schools, so thank you very much. And finally, Dr. Hall, thank you very much. We met earlier in the summer, I think, at David Scott's house, and my wife and I, we loved meeting you. It was great to get to know you, and so I look forward to getting to know you more in the future. So thanks again for being here tonight. I want to have a few distinguished members here in the audience from our Board of Education, and so I want to make sure we recognize who they are. First, our Vice President, Benji Moriyama, is in the back. So say hi, Benji. Hi, Benji. Benji, say hi back. A distinguished board member, our longest serving board member, Angela Wright. Dr. Angela Wright is here. And Aida Merhamic in the back as well, or another board member we have. So thank you all for being here. Did I miss anybody else from the Board of Education? Okay, finally I want to recognize two more guests that are here today, and actually three, but our high school principal came out tonight, Tim Cryer. Thank you for being here, Tim. And Matt House, our elementary principal, is also here tonight. I understand we have a lot of students here from Antioch Midwest. Raise your hand if you're a student here at Antioch Midwest. Great. Well, thank you all for coming out tonight. I am honored that you're here to hear me speak. I would love for you to ask me any questions you want about education. It doesn't have to be about the levy. It can be anything. And so feel free to throw that out there. We'll have some time for question and answer at the end. I love having students around and the opportunity to talk to all of you about schools. It's one of my favorite things to discuss, and I'm actually honored for you being here to hear me speak. So thank you all, and I will try not to bore you to death, but I do have a very important topic conversation to discuss about our schools. I also want to finally introduce my colleague here on my right, and at the Board of Education office, our treasurer, Dawn Weller. So Dawn's our main finance person. She's the brains when it comes to finance and money and how we spend it. So what will happen is, I think if we ask questions certainly about money, or things come up where maybe I'm tripping on some words or whatever it may be, Dawn can easily, she'll step in and answer some questions specifically around finance, and she's an expert at it. So we appreciate her being here tonight as well. So we're here tonight because we have a big levy coming up in Yellow Springs School. So I want to take an opportunity to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing and why we're here, and why the Board of Education decided to put this levy on the ballot. Okay. One second. All right. You see, this is the president. So our schools are doing great. What I want to start by saying is we have had 8 years in a row of being an excellent with distinction school district. And that is an awesome thing, because the distinction label has only been around for 3 years. But 5 years before that, we were excellent, which was still the top rating for the state of Ohio. And so we're really thrilled about that and excited about that. I think it's an important point to emphasize here right off the bat, that being an excellent with distinction district, which is the top rating the state can give any school district in the state of Ohio, means something. And we're proud of it. We're excited about what we do. We're doing great things with our kids, and that's proof of it. Dayton Daily News article in the spring came out, a wonderful article about our high school, and what it said was we measured Ohio graduation test results for kids that are 10th graders and compared them for every school district in the Tri-County area of Greene, Clark, actually it was the entire Miami, Dayton metro area, so it was more than just the three-county area around us. And what it did was it measured every high school from 5 years ago till last school year, and it said how much have they improved from 5 years ago in terms of the total percentage of students passing the OGT until now. And of all the districts that showed the greatest improvement in student achievement from the very first year, 5 years ago, until now, no district in the entire Miami Valley area showed more improvement, no school showed more improvement than Yellow Springs High School. And so we're very proud of that. Thank you. Thank you. And so what that says is that we've been making a lot of improvements consistently for the past 5 years and done a lot of great work. I think our board's done a great job giving us direction, and our high school principal, Tim Cryer's been doing a great job with leading, and our teachers are doing the work every single day on the ground with the kids, and that's really they're the biggest difference makers in all this. We've made great progress with special education, particularly in Mills Lawn School, and so we're really proud of the work Matt's been doing and the teachers have been doing at Mills Lawn. This is an area, if you know special education, you work in special education, it's a really tough nut to crack. It's extremely difficult and extremely challenging, but we feel like we're really making some genuine progress in special education with our kids. We're doing some inroads. We're improving our identification process, and we're doing great work with interventions as well. We feel like we've got a long way to go there, but we're making great progress, and so I'm proud of the work we've done there. The last thing I want to talk very briefly about is project-based learning. So what we've done is we've been blessed the past few months actually to have I'll talk a little bit more about this, but we've been exploring this idea of project-based learning, or PBL. And in a nutshell, what it basically means is in a traditional classroom, you have a teacher sort of didactically giving information to students. Students are the receptacles. They take in the information, and then they spit it back out on a test. And then 2 weeks later, they forget it. That's right. That's right. So oftentimes it happens. What project-based learning does is it kind of turns that whole paradigm on its head. It says, instead of doing it that way, what we have is the teacher becomes sort of a facilitator of learning with the students. And students' learning basically boils down to working in groups and solving complex real-world problems and then presenting on those problems publicly to panels of folks from the community and in their classroom and teachers and adults and things of that nature. So the idea would be, as an example, the way that would look in practice is if we have a problem in Yellow Springs, the emerald ash borer, which is a beetle that has basically invaded a lot of our ash trees. And so in 5th grade, as an example, we teach invasive species. And so what we'd like to do is create a project where our students work in groups to go out and investigate the invasive species of the emerald ash borer, and then come up with some solutions in groups to the problem, identify the problem first of all, and then come up with solutions to the problem, and then present their problems potentially to a governing body like council. And that's project-based learning. They'd be able to make an impact beyond the walls of the school, and also they learn the content and standards that are important. So we think that's the best way for kids to learn. We've seen a lot of schools that are doing it right, and so we're trying to move in that direction too. I'd love to talk more about that, and I can really talk for hours about this particular topic because I'm really excited about it, but I got to move on because that's not the main focus of our presentation today. But if at the end you have questions about it, I'd love to engage in that kind of discussion. So our schools are in imminent financial danger. A couple things I think I want to point out specifically along those lines is that revenues have decreased significantly over the past several years. Our federal revenue just this year took a 10% cut over previous years. It's ironic because this year is the first time we've qualified for full school Title I funding, which means that 40% of our kids at our elementary school are on free and reduced lunch. Well, given that scenario, you'd expect to get more dollars from the state, from the federal government, but instead we got a 10% cut in our federal funding dollars as a result. In addition to that, our state funding, which is another source of revenue, has reduced pretty significantly. We had a tangible personal property tax, which was a tax that was levied locally, basically, and went up to the state, and then the state then redistributed those funds to us. At one point, our tangible personal property tax was at a rate of $400,000 per year. That tax has been completely X'd out and is no longer being levied or being collected, I should say, from local businesses. So that's a tax that we no longer get. That's $400 that we no longer get on an $8 million budget from the state. In addition to that, our state funding has pretty much been flat funded or decreased actually significantly over the past several years. So I think if you look at the past 10 years, you look at state funding, at least the past 5 or 6, what's happened is they said things like, well, we're going to give you 98% of the full funding, which is 98% of last year's funding. Then the next year they say, we're going to give you 99% of, I see some people nodding their heads because they know, they see it personally. We're going to give you 99% of last year's funding. And then the following year they say, we're going to give you 97% of last year's funding. Before you know it, we have a significant decrease in funding from state aid. And the reality is, they may tell you they're funding us, they're not fully funding us at all as a school. And in fact, we're getting less and less dollars every single year from the state of Ohio. So another source of funding for us comes locally. Our local funding breaks down in a couple of different ways. But I want to tell you first, our property tax is a big piece, which is what this levy is going to cover if it's passed and if the voters decide to do that. But that property tax has actually been pretty steady and shown a little bit of an increase over the years, but it's been fairly flat funded over the past several years as we've gone forward. What I want to spend a little bit of time talking about right now is our income tax. How many of you were around about 11 years ago when that income tax passed? Raise your hand. I just want to know, folks who were here. Okay. So when that income tax passed 11 years ago, if you were here, you remember what they said, which was that this is a tax that will grow over time, and the hope is that as the tax grows significantly, revenues will continue to grow at the rate of inflation, and then when expenses grow, they'll grow perfectly well, and we won't have to go back to the voters for new money, really, not ever, but certainly it'd be a while before we have to go back to the voters for new money. And in most school districts, as you can see by the slide, that works out pretty well, because it'll be the next slide actually, income tax collection actually is 14% less than during the first year of full collections 10 years ago. 10 years ago. Imagine all the inflationary increases and how costs have gone up since then. 14% lower than 10 years ago is what we're collecting in Yellow Springs. But here's what the average Ohio district during the years 2003 to 2008 showed in terms of their income tax growth. The average Ohio district from 2003, those dollars to 2008, you just take the raw dollars and you compare them between the 2 years, their income tax collection grew by 70% during that 5-year time period. Yellow Springs schools, that's the average. Yellow Springs schools grew at negative 2.4% during that same time period.
Why is that?
That's a great question, and I don't really have the answer to that question. What I can tell you is that that's happened. I don't know why. There's a lot of speculation. A lot of folks feel like we have an aging population, and what's happened is people earned income hasn't grown as much, and so that sort of thing. I can't speculate why that is, but I can tell you that this is the reality of what we've seen in terms of our tax collection over the years. I'm sorry. So our expenses are outpacing our revenues, consequently, by roughly $500,000 a year right now. Our cash balance has declined. We had a cash balance. I mean, there's an Antioch publishing company that when that went down, we got about a little over $1 million from the Antioch publishing company, and that helped us have a cash balance that was fairly high. At one point, the cash balance was $3.6 million, which is great. About 3 years ago, that cash balance went down to about 3.1. And since then, just over the past 3 years, we've had a decline in our cash balance by 53% to the point where it's now $1.5 million. That's your savings account, basically, your cash balance that you have in your account. Our student count has grown as well. So the past few years, we've done some great things with our kids and our schools, I think, and we've had a lot more people come into our school district. And despite the fact that we have more students coming into our school that live in the district, we are not getting additional dollars for those students from the state of Ohio or locally. And so we have maybe 20 or 30 kids who have came into our small district of 720 kids the past few years. And for those folks who have come in who live in the community, we don't get any more dollars for them. And the reason for that is because we're at the guarantee, which is the state says this is the maximum, this is the amount you're going to get no matter what for funding for your kids. And if you get a lot more kids, you may think you get more money, but the bottom line is because you're considered a wealthy district, we won't fund you anymore. And so that's a big piece of issue. I don't know if you want to elaborate more on that, Don, yourself. But, so our student count has grown and we haven't gotten additional dollars. 11 years ago, that was the last time that we went to the voters of Yellow Springs and the school system and asked for additional tax revenue, additional operating funds. And so it's been 11 years. And so what I want to make a point of that is, look around us. All of the districts around us in those last 11 years have gone to the voters several times to ask for additional revenue during a time where we have been fiscally responsible, fiscally prudent, and I think done a great job managing the public funds for Yellow Springs schools. But it's been 11 years, and we're proud of that. So the question is, I bring this next part up about what have we done to address this revenue shortfall. Because I've heard people say, well, the schools should cut more and they should make reductions, and I want to make it very clear we've made lots of cuts. We've made lots of cuts. And so here are some of the staffing cuts we've made just over the past 3-4 years. 5.5 teaching positions. Board classified position, which includes custodial staff and bus drivers, things of that nature. Maintenance position was cut. We have 2 maintenance guys in our entire district. We had 2 maintenance guys in our entire district. Now we have 1. And he's just the maintenance guy for the entire district, and he's the supervisor of the custodians as well. So he does kind of all that work at one time. We've had a reduction in our central office support staff as well. We've eliminated a curriculum supervisor position that existed about 3 years ago. That happened before I came on. And recently we reduced our special education supervisor from about a 2/3 employee to a half-time employee. And I have to tell you, that has had a huge impact on our schools because she is working tons of hours. In fact, today I just talked to her. She told me she's working until 11 o'clock at night, frequently at nights, and putting extra days in beyond her set time because she's only a half-time employee when she really needs to work a lot more. See, our special education supervisor believes very strongly in having personal relationships with parents and kids and really sitting down and having great conversations with them. And sometimes those relationships take time to build, and she's made the time to do that. But unfortunately, she's been working well beyond her contracted date. In addition, we've had $40,000 in stipend cuts, and these are teacher leadership positions mostly, and other positions of that nature, and so that's had a huge impact on our staff. But this is one I really want to highlight. Every single staff member, from me, the superintendent, all the way down to our custodians and all of our teachers, have taken a net pay cut 2 years in a row. That's this year and last year. So when I say net pay cut, let me clarify what that means. There's been an across-the-board salary freeze for 2 years. In addition to that, we have had a $500 flex spending account for health insurance and health costs that people may have. Every one of our employees spends that entire health savings account every single year. Well, they no longer have that, so I'm counting that as a $500 cut for every single employee. In addition to that, our premiums, the percentage of premiums that every employee pays went up 5% at the same time, and that's been the past 2 years. And we all know how health insurance costs continue to grow. Well, add that and add 5% you're paying on top of that, and then we're all kind of paying significantly more. So I think our staff's done their part to take the cuts in a lot of different ways. Building budgets have been cut by 10%, 2 years in a row, and I want to tell you a story about that. I have an art teacher at our high school who I had a very great discussion with the other day about, who was talking to me about the fact that she doesn't have basic art supplies to do the work she needs to do. So we're trying to find other ways to fundraise. And what we talked about doing is there's a big art show coming up here in a few weeks, and we want to see if our kids can have art in the art show and present and do those kinds of things. And she told me that she doesn't have the supplies to be able to support the kids, to be able to sell their art at this art show right now. And this is the result of a 10% budget cut, I think 2 years in a row, because that's affected a lot of her work. So in total, we've cut more than $700,000 from our budget annually, every single year. Despite this, we're still deficit spending at the rate of $500,000 a year. Are there other ways to raise funds? I mean, that's a good question to ask, and I've heard that a few times, and I want to kind of address that issue. There are only really 4 ways to raise funds in school. The first one is fundraising, and we're creating a new fundraising arm at our school district called Yscape. We've just kind of established a fund through the Community Foundation, and the great thing about Yscape, it's going to help fund our 2020 plan, our strategic planning efforts, from now until forever, as long as the fund exists. And so we're really excited about what that can do, and we have a lead gift for that fund. But the reality is that fund is not going to produce at the level of 500, 900, whatever, however much money we need a year to be able to support our schools every single year. Although we're excited about it and what it can do. I don't think fundraising is the answer for us. Long-term answer for our financial goals. Open enrollment growth is another way to do it. Well, right now, on open enrollment at Mills Lawn School, our elementary school, we are pretty much full, in open enrollment. So just about every student that we can take in our classrooms are full. We have a standard of maximum number of students we can have in a classroom because we believe small class sizes are important. And we think that that's a critically important thing to stand for. We think it's best for kids, and we're not going to go above that number for our open enrollment students. At the high school, we're taking more open enrollment students, but it's almost maxed out basically in terms of facilities and space for open enrollment students. The great thing about it is we get about $5,800 per student in open enrollment, which is wonderful, but when you're maxed out, the only way we can add more open enrollment is to find other facilities. Well, when you get other facilities, that costs more money. Student fees. So we can always add a technology fee and other fees for students, but again, that's not going to help us. That's a very small amount of money that will help us in terms of our overall budget. And then the last way, obviously, is through the tax levy process, which is what we're talking about today. Let me drink some water. So, what's being proposed by the Board of Education is a 7.4 mil emergency levy. That's a 5-year levy for 5 years. And it's important to note that emergency levies don't grow. This is on the November ballot. And if you're a $100,000 homeowner, you'll be paying $226 a year in additional taxes. And that's $100,000 in your assessed property value. And I want to make a point that your assessed value in Yellow Springs is still lower than what your house would sell in the market. I've talked to several agents about this, and they've confirmed that across the board. Because it's an important point to make. So how high are our school taxes? This is a great discussion because I've had a lot of talk with folks, and early on when we were talking about a levy, people have said, well, you know, our taxes are really high in Yellow Springs. We pay higher taxes for education than nearly anybody else around us. But here are the facts. It's been incorrectly stated, first of all, that Yellow Springs residents pay the highest school taxes in the area. If you look at our property taxes, which is what this levy covers, our property taxes, these are the tri-county area. So this is Greene County, Clark County, and Montgomery County. Every district in those 3 counties, and this is the millage, effective millage rate they pay by county. Yellow Springs isn't even they're in the bottom 30% in terms of total property tax millage collection within the 3-county area. It's the bottom 30%. I want to show you something else, but I have to come over here to do that. So, I know some of you are thinking, well, that's property taxes, Mario. We pay property and income tax in Yellow Springs. Well, that's a great point, and I'm not going to ignore that point because I think that's an important point to make. When you add up the property and the income tax, or all the total taxes we pay for our schools in the village, and then you compare it to every other district in that same tri-county area, and all the taxes they pay, income and property total, we're still not even in the top 40% for the tri-county area. Not even the top 40%. So there we are, right behind New Lebanon, and you can see Oakwood way at the top, levying effective mills of 98, way beyond anybody else in the area. Right behind them is Huber Heights, and actually, Mad River just passed the levy, so they're going to go all the way up to number 2 pretty soon here at the end of this year. Of course, there are other districts who have levies on the ballot as well that may move up on this scale too. So we're not even in the top 40% when you add the total taxes we pay for our schools. Ooh, that's not what it was. Okay. I think I just said that. So what happens if this passes? A couple things I want to say. Art, music, and PE classes will be protected. And I think that's an important thing to say because all around us, you go to Beaver Creek, you go to Fairborn, you go to Xenia, they're cutting these classes for our kids. And we in Yellow Springs believe in teaching to the whole child, which means we maintain our music classes, which means we maintain our art classes, which means we think physical education is important. And oftentimes, when schools have to make major cuts, those are the first programs to be cut every single time. And so we're gonna try to make sure that happens and that continues to happen in Yellow Springs. Class sizes will stay relatively low. I say relatively low because the reality is when I made those $700,000 in cuts we talked about, guess what happened to our class sizes? They went up a little bit. Unfortunately, now we have a few classes that are over 30 kids. We have some singletons at the high school or single class sections that are over 30 kids. We have a few elementary classes that are 27 or 28 kids. And unfortunately, that's not good for kids. It's not best for kids, but it's what we have to deal with. It's where we are right now. But we don't want it to get any higher. I was talking to the superintendent in Fairborn the other day, and what he told me was, he said, Mario, we have classes, some of our elective classes we're teaching get up to 40 kids a class in the elementary school. 40 students per class in the elementary school. Well, we don't want that to happen in Yellow Springs. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen to our kids. Because we don't believe it's right for kids. We don't believe it's right for student learning. And I also think we will continue to attract and retain the most talented educators. I had several interviews for positions this summer. One of those interviews, I sat down with a teacher who was a great teacher. We wanted her to come work for us, and we were so thrilled and excited about her coming to work for us. We offered her the position, and she had a discussion with me, and candidly, she says to me, Mario, well, I just got a 2% raise at my school right now. What are you guys doing? I said, well, we kind of took a cut really 2 years in a row. I don't know if that has any effect on this, but that person didn't take the job, ultimately. And so I think it's important. If we want to retain and recruit the best teachers around, we got to make sure that we're competitive in terms of how we pay them. And that's not just for teachers, it's also for administrators. And across the board, our teacher rates are a little below the 50th percentile right now, and our administrators are well below that, actually, in terms of our average pay for the position, for the Tri-County area. I think we increase the probability that families will move to Yellow Springs and stay in Yellow Springs. When you have districts that put levies out there and pass levies regularly, parents want to move to that community and they want to stay here. It creates a vibrant community, and I think that's really important to have that. And in addition to that, I think your property values will remain high and stay up. You go to a district down the road here, north of Kings Island, called Little Miami Schools. They hadn't passed the levy for a long time. And in Little Miami, when they didn't pass levies for a long time, guess what happened to their property values? They hit the tank. And so a lot of people aren't moving into those communities because the community did not support their schools. So I think it's important to note that if we pass this levy, if the voters decide to pass the levy, that would be probably a benefit, I think, that happens. So I think that's all I really have for you. I want to thank you all for coming here today. That's my information and Don's information. I don't know if you have anything to add that maybe I left out or forgot.
What else can I add?
There's an argument about consolidation. I think that I've heard people say, why don't we just let us be consolidated by other districts? And I'm willing to talk about that if anybody's interested in that kind of question or that kind of discussion. I'd love to do that, or any other conversation you want to have. So I'm open now to questions. Thank you so much.
Well, I have a comment. First, I want to thank you for the presentation. I also want to thank you for coming here to be for this position you've taken, superintendent of schools. It's so important, and this is a really persuasive argument to vote for the levy. Now, since I'm an educator, and I come from, my family also are educators. My wife's retired, but my son teaches at Xavier, and we all live in the village. We lived in the village for over 20 years. That we always support education. But that's not what I want to say. What I want to say is this. How can you convince this community to vote yes for this levy? What can you do to make them see the logic of your presentation? Because it's really a no-brainer after listening to you. Why wouldn't you vote for the levy?
Well, I appreciate that. Let me make one thing clear. I'm not here, as much as it may seem that way, I'm not here to ask people to vote yes or no. I'm really here just to give information from the school's perspective about everything that's happened and everything that's gone into it. I think that's a personal choice everybody has to make for themselves. There is a levy campaign out there that's definitely promoting the levy and trying to support it, but that's not what I'm here for tonight. I'm here just to give the information. All I can tell you is I got into this profession because I wanted to help kids learn. And I think there are documented ways to make that happen. And I think it's important, to me, it's completely unethical to have schools where class sizes are 40 to 1. That's wrong.
Yes.
And I'll stand behind that my whole entire life.
Yeah.
40 to 1, especially for elementary kids. And we're not going to let that happen. We're going to do whatever we can to make sure that doesn't happen.
I just noticed in your information that Yellow Springs didn't get state support because it was considered
Wealthy.
to be wealthy school. How can you make it not wealthy?
I'll let Don answer that.
Can you repeat the question? Can you repeat it?
Repeat the question.
You want to repeat it, Don?
The question is, how could you make Yellow Springs School District not wealthy so that it can get the state support?
What the state,
You should be on.
it's what the state is looking at, when they're looking at calling us a wealthy district, they're looking at our property values and they're looking at our median income that comes in on the tax returns. So what we have in Yellow Springs, it was very unusual in these economic times, is while other property values everywhere were decreasing, we didn't just stay the same. We even increased a little bit when everybody else was decreasing. Our property values maintained and still had a little bit of growth. Our median income remains high, so when the state, this is strictly based on numbers, and when the state is looking at those factors, we appear to be very wealthy, which is in direct contradiction to our elementary school now being 40% free and reduced. So we're in a very unique situation. And there's no real way to prove it, it's just all based on the numbers.
Okay, and following that reasoning, do you think instead of only property tax, would you possibly think about income tax levy?
You know, that's not working. Make sure it's working. Try one more time. Okay. Okay. I think the Board of Education, I don't know if any board members want to speak to this, but I'll say something very quickly. But I think the Board of Education decided on the idea for a property tax over an income tax. Mainly because if you see the record of our income tax, it's not shown any growth, over the years, and it's really, in fact, declined significantly. And so that is really subject to the market, subject to a lot of different factors, and frankly, it's not been the growth initiative that we initially thought it was years ago. Does any of the board members want to speak to that at all? Angie, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, we did have that discussion we had a long discussion about property tax versus income tax, and it was a hard decision because either way, it's pain to the community. And I think it was a close decision. I think we looked at the past record where when we first went out for an income tax levy in Yellow Springs, the first time it actually failed. And maybe that's because it was a newer thing to the village. We hadn't had one before, but that made us worried about, whether or not it would an additional income tax levy might pass. And then there was discussion about, which residents would it be more of a burden to. And we thought that a property tax might be less of a burden to those most challenged in these economic times. But either way, we certainly realized that it was a sacrifice to whomever was paying it.
Yeah, excuse me. I'd like to continue this reasoning, and we are all in this. The property owner and the non-property owner, and those people that have the means to help. We're all in this. And what about combination, property and income tax? And I think that would be, everybody suffers, but we suffer together.
I think there was some discussion about that too, but ultimately I think the board settled on the emergency levy tax. I don't know, Aida and Angela, do you have anything you want to add at all? Or?
I just want to say a similar thing to Benji, that, we really, this was torturous conversations we had. We have tried to do what we can. We appreciate what our administration has done, but it felt very necessary to go in this direction. There was no easy answer here.
The other thing with an income tax is that there's two different types of income tax. There are two different types of income tax. There's a traditional income tax, which is what we have, and then there's an earned income tax, which is only assessed on the money that you earn. If we were to change to an earned income tax, what we are getting right now would decrease, and we'd have to make the rate higher. That, of course, was one of the options, but you cannot have more than one income tax per school district. So what we would have to do is the income tax that we have now that was voted in 2001 is a continuing permanent income tax. We would basically have to repeal that original tax and then put on a whole new tax at a higher rate, which can be very risky. And then if you were to do an earned income tax, which nowadays seems to
fare better than a traditional income tax, that rate would have to be even higher for us to collect not only the revenue we have now, but additional revenue. So those were things that we had to discuss.
Yeah.
Carl, you had your hand up.
Well, I've been on levy committees for I don't know how many years, and I was on the committee when we passed the income tax. And the difficulty of getting that passed was incredible. We had an all-out effort, and we did get it passed. And as I said before, they failed the first time. So the difficulty of getting an income tax passed is extremely great. And I think going for a property tax, it was the sensible thing to do. I don't see, I prefer, income tax is the most sensible way to fund schools. Property tax, it's insane that we use property taxes to fund our school, but we're stuck with that, and we just have no choice. I think it was a wise decision for the school board to do this.
Yeah, but after all, this income tax, and the state look at the income from the tax return of the higher income family. This is the thing that made Yellow Springs considered to be a rich district.
I think home value has a lot to do with it, really, and that's a big piece, Joe. Sure, you have your hand.
Yeah, you currently enjoy 20 mills for operating.
Correct.
Out of 10 levies generate those 20 mills.
Right.
They've been on books over the years.
100 years maybe.
Well, I don't know about 20. So you're asking for an additional 7.4. What percentage increase is that in the operating mills that we're talking about?
That's a good question. You want to try to answer that? You can probably talk about dollars, but in terms of operating mills?
18%.
What was the
30.
question?
You're currently, they've got 10 mills,
Current
10
expense.
levies that are for operating. They've got an additional 3 levies that takes care of capital, retirement of bonds, etc.
There's another emergency levy on it.
Yeah.
That's the third, I think.
And so those 10 levies generate 20 mills.
20 mills.
And that's what you're operating on. You're coming to the voters and asking for a 7.4 mil increase.
Right. That's 33% basically. But if you
37.
add
You're asking for
the
a
emergency,
37% increase.
we also have the other emergency levy on the ballot that's actually used for operating costs as well. So you have to add that on as well, Jerry, because that's part of that covers our operating costs too.
I notice that you say it's a 5 mil levy, or 5-year levy.
5 years, yes.
What probability of it, what are you doing and the board doing so that it goes away at the end of 5 years?
That's a great question, Jerry. I think we're going to continue to manage our finances in the best way we can, frankly. I mean, I can tell you right now, our track record the past 3 years shows that we've done a pretty good job of managing our finances. And that track record for the past 3 years says that we're, when funds get tight, we're doing the best we can in management. So I don't know that our management style is going to change anything over the next 5 years in terms of how we believe we should be managing our funds. So
we'll be back in 5 years.
For a renewal?
Or a replacement.
Yeah, or no levy. I mean, it all depends where the board's at that point and where our dollars are at. And hopefully, it'd be great if everything bounces back and if our income tax performs the way we expected it to perform the first time instead of a 14% decrease since its inception. It'd be great if our state revenue increased instead of a decrease in that revenue. It'd be great if our federal income tax increased instead of our federal funds increased instead of the 10% decrease that we've seen there. So if our other funds bounce back the way we'd love them to bounce back, I mean, it'd be great to not have to come back after 5 years. But I'm certainly not going to put anybody in a position to say we can guarantee that will happen. So, a good question. Thank you.
Well, to the income tax, as I understand it, the income tax is paid by people that work in Yellow Springs.
No.
That's not the case.
So the village income tax is for people who work in Yellow Springs. This income tax is for those who live in the district, which includes the village and the township. Jerry wants to add some of that too.
It's both on earned and unearned income.
He said
so
earned and unearned.
If you're a retiree, you get taxed on it. You have dividends or interest income.
Get taxed on that. Yeah.
You're lucky if you have interest income. But anyway, you're going to get taxed on it. They operate off your Ohio AGI, is what they start on, adjusted gross income.
So it's earned and unearned income. Great point.
So despite the fact that we are kind of an aging community, we probably have a lot of people that have that retirement income, the income has declined to you guys from that tax. So wouldn't that mean, wouldn't really be the Yellow Springs economy that has contributed to that? And so my question is, is that kind of considered another path of increasing revenue for the schools, and what is the district doing to support economic development in the village?
So you're suggesting is the income tax another path to raise revenue for the schools, and then what's the district? Is that right? I think I don't know.
Maybe
I'll try to answer it. And
maybe I can jump in on this. So yeah, I think we talked with Village Council, and Mario's been in discussions with Chamber of Commerce, because as you say, the economic development of the village is intricately linked with the success of the schools. So the more businesses and residents that we have here, the broader our tax base, the larger our income. But it's a vicious or a virtuous cycle depending on how it goes. So if we have more people and more businesses and more income, we can do more to improve our schools, which will attract more people and more businesses. So that's the virtuous cycle. The vicious cycle is what Mario was mentioning for the community near Kings Island. And that is, if people don't see good schools, they may not see this as a place to relocate their family or their business. And so that takes money away from the schools, which can make them perform less well and then continue into that vicious cycle. So going back to your point, yeah, so we've been having good discussions with council about how to do things like joint marketing and the kinds of internships and other things that is a powerful partnership between council and district.
The chamber's working a little bit on they're going to start working on some marketing for us as well through the Facebook page and other avenues, which is great, I think, for our schools. If you were at Street Fair, you saw that there was a big sign that was put up right in front of our district office that said, Fearless Foodies. That's where they had all the food in town. Sponsored by Yellow Springs Schools, and we're not donating any dollars for it, but we are allowing the use of our land on school property for the food vendors. And I think that's a great opportunity, and so we really appreciate the chamber doing that for us and recognizing the school's contribution to the street fair. I definitely agree with everything that Benji said. He was kind of right on the money about that. I do think that there's great opportunities for internships as we start to work on this idea of project-based learning more. I think that those will be interesting opportunities where we can have our kids working more with local businesses and people within the community and have much more of a seamless community school connection that I think can help local business owners really use our kids as interns, and also to help village problem solve, help the village problem solve. And maybe our kids can come up with some of the best answers to some of our biggest problems in the village. And so we're excited about that possibility in the future, and hopefully that will help spur economic development. But there's no doubt that a strong school will bring a strong community on any day, every day. So, any other questions? Or you guys have any questions about anything at all?
Sure, I'll ask one.
Okay.
What about, you've got these great teachers, and you guys have had this 8 years of excellence and so forth. Have you guys pursued any other opportunities of grants? Because you're doing problem-based, and I know that's like one of the big, newest, innovations. What is the schools and teachers at their level, are they seeking, because there's funds and scholarships and grant money to implement more problem-based learning. Have you guys looked at any of those kind of sources to bring in?
We have, and about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we got a grant for a STEM grant, and we worked with some of our teachers being STEM fellows and really doing a lot of work. Benji was a huge part of that grant and getting that done for us, and we really appreciate that. We get a lot of grants through the Community Foundation frequently, and so we're very excited about that. Martha Holder Jennings grants. We have the Morgan Foundation as well as giving us grants. There was a yoga grant that just came through about a year ago, and we're going to get a link on our website that has a wonderful video from the Yellow Springs Youth Yoga in our schools, and so you'll see that probably next week. And it was a whole year-long project, great grant that really, I think, enriched the lives of our kids and taught them about yoga in our schools, which we thought was fantastic for them. What I will say also about grants is, the theory about some grants is that I think sometimes with grants the tail wags the dog. And so what we see is you get a grant 1 year and then it goes away, and then you've created this new program that's no longer funded. So you have to find ways to fund it, then you fund it out of your general fund. That increases your expenditures and creates, a bigger problem in many ways. So we want to make sure that whatever we get funded through grants is something that's sustainable, something that we believe in long-term, and it's something that we really want to do. The other problem with it is we don't really have anybody on staff to go out and seek grants for us. Our central office is pretty much consisting of the people you see in front of you today, because we're such a small district, and so we don't have other folks to do a lot of that work for us. So we depend a lot on our community members who are great. We have a lot of great grant writers in Yellow Springs who have written a number of grants for us. We have a grant out right now for the USDA to bring a farm-to-school initiative for our school district. And hopefully we're keeping our fingers crossed. We're supposed to hear back in the next few days about whether we get that grant. And if we do, we'll be able to get some greenhouses put in and outside of all of our buildings, get our kids involved in some farm-to-table initiatives, and grow food and bring it in for our kids to eat in our own cafeteria. So we're pretty thrilled about that.
How do you think the election that's going to take place in a few weeks will impact state funding for education?
Glad you asked that question. This is a topic that's very near and dear to me personally. I think we're so concerned about national elections, we forget that if you're concerned about education, you need to be concerned about state elections, and particularly our state senator and our state representatives, who are all up for election this year, and we need to really consider what they've done and their record on education. And frankly, we got a lot of work to do in that area. The responsibility ultimately has fallen to the states to fund education, and yet they have not done that. They've put it again on the local community and local taxpayers. And unfortunately, it's still not, the funding system was declared unconstitutional several times. Doesn't matter what the Ohio Supreme Court says, the legislators haven't acted on it. And so we are still in this situation. And fortunately for us, we have a community that still values education. And it says, you know what, we understand that's happened and we're going to fight for education, but we believe that we're going to still try to do our best to support our schools right now. And you hear inspiring stories all the time in Yellow Springs. There aren't a lot of communities that have folks who have had kids go through our schools, have had grandkids go through our schools, that had long been gone and come to the school to volunteer every single day. And we got a lot of those people in Yellow Springs, which is great. And we have a lot of people who are, on the levy committee, who are active and who are people who want to support our schools in many ways, who frankly just don't have kids or grandkids and really just believe in community schools and believe in having a school that's a vibrant community, and they're passionate about it. And so we are very, very lucky in that way in Yellow Springs and proud of our community. That's very unlike other places.
One example of how you can have an instantaneous change in your funding when there's a change in government leadership is when the new governor came in 2 years ago, and he had to come in, and the first thing he was going to work on was the school funding formula. And when Mario was referring to us losing the tangible personal property tax that was taxed on businesses, what the state had set up a while ago is that started to be phased out starting in 2005, and was going to be phased out over a period of time, and the state was going to reimburse us for that money, for that loss during this time, to give us time to seek additional revenues locally or wherever else to subsidize for that money. So that was $400,000 that we were losing from 2005 to around 2010, and then we were going to be subsidized from the state for that. Well, when the new governor took leadership, he said those subsidies are cut. And we were supposed to receive money from 2018 to cover for that $400,000. This is the last year we will see that money, and then it just goes away. And that was done in a 2-year period, and the state funding formula is always supposed to be figured out by July 1st of every year. That year we found out in September, after the year had already started, that we're going to be phasing that out in 2 years. So it can change very quickly.
Question.
Yes, sir.
I mean, as an educator myself, and my question doesn't have anything to do with the levy, but as an educator, you said that Yellow Springs has reached excellence with distinction for the past 8 years. What I want to know as an educator is, in your opinion, what are the reasons, or how was Yellow Springs able to achieve that amazing goal, in your opinion?
You know, I think we have, obviously we have great teachers. I mean, Marzano's research says clearly, classroom teacher has the greatest impact on student achievement, period. You know, and I think that's a huge factor. I think we have some really great administrators, but really our community is incredible. Our kids come to our school. We have some of the highest crawl scores, which is the entry into kindergarten exam for kids of any school district in the area, the highest actually. And so our kids come prepared for school right off the bat, doing very well. And so we have a distinct advantage over a lot of other school districts who are struggling in that way. So, but I come from some challenging districts. I was at Princeton and Norwood and Cincinnati for a while, and I've seen some difficult, challenging schools. And I can tell you, we have a community that is unlike any you can be in terms of supporting our schools and education. And our parents are great. Our kids are incredibly wise beyond their years, and our kids graduate as most of them as incredible public speakers. They're confident. They speak highly, you know, and they're great debaters too. You know, we have wonderful kids who can articulate themselves well, and we're proud of that. That's our. I mean, our teachers do a good job with that. Our administrators, but really our parents and our community are, I think, the foundation for that happening in Yellow Springs.
It sounds like there's a cult. I'm not familiar with Yellow Springs as a community, but it sounds like a culture has been created and has been a long-standing tradition that helps promote good schools and good families, etc. Why would, and I'll echo what the gentleman said in the back, if the community is voting on this particular levy with that culture in place, why would it be an issue?
Because it's a 7.4 mil levy. I mean, these are tough economic times. Folks are struggling, you know, just like anywhere else. And so I think it's difficult to do. They ask folks to pay more than they're paying right now for our schools under any circumstance. We have people who are on fixed incomes who, frankly, they're struggling to pay the bills right now as it is, but are going to come out and say they're going to vote for the levy because they believe and they support our schools and are going to do that because they think it's important and critically important, which is one of the great things about Yellow Springs. You really don't get that anywhere else. And so we're lucky to have that. But yeah, I mean, it's a tough time for anybody to pass a levy. I know that just recently in August elections, you had new money levies. I think there were like, I don't know, 13 or 15 levies statewide that were new money levies, and only 2 passed. So it was a very, very low percentage. Of course, the previous election, which I think was the primary election, I think it was March or May, I'm not sure what May it was, but that had a significant high passage rate, which is kind of fascinating. You know, that one's really high, and they would have thought it would have been the opposite. So.
You know, I'd just like to say a little bit more because I appreciate your comment, and I think we don't want to be complacent. I mean, we've had a wonderful culture that has been supported by the community, by the teachers, by the families, by so forth and so on. But I don't think that this takes a lot of thought and a lot of concern, and we care about our constituents, and so we don't want to come across as making assumptions that just because we've created this and we've had this for so long that we can continue to depend on people in this way. And I think, you know, in part it's because we have this great sensitivity, this great awareness of what we have created here, and we don't take it for granted.
Oh, you can feel that in the presentation and some of the comments that I'm hearing. It just sounds like the momentum is there with the district, and I hope that it continues. I really wish this district well. Great presentation.
You know, I live in the community. My family goes. I have a daughter in 3rd grade now that goes to school here. My son's going to be going to schools here pretty soon, and I got to tell you, it is a great place to be. You know, right now Mills Lawn School is working on all-school musical. How many schools do an all-school musical? Not very many. And Mills Lawn School is doing an all-school musical, and they're very excited about it. She got a part in the musical, and we are thrilled about it. But we value the arts here. We value, we value it, and we think it's important. We value health and wellness here. It's also important in our community, and so, you know, people want that to happen. They want to make sure we do that for our kids. And I think teaching to the whole child is critically important in Yellow Springs. So that's.
We really have to be mindful in Yellow Springs that I've lived here for 35 years. When I bought my first house in Yellow Springs, it was a $20,000 house, and that house now would sell for considerably more than that. And I'm of an age where until a few months ago I was on a fixed income, and looking at another, if I'm looking at this, it looks like a lot of money to me. So I want to support the schools. I'm very proud of my schools. But I think you have to be respectful of the people who've been here for a long time, who are on fixed incomes, who look at those tax statements every time they come in and they go, should I sell or should I stay? Because the other side of the steady and rising property taxes is that you're, when you're faced with a 7 mil levy, it's a lot more than it would have been 25 years ago. And so you have to be respectful of that along with the culture of the school improvement.
They're asking that gentleman to pay an additional 12.1% property tax. 12.1%.
And I'm happy to do it, I want to say that. I'm very happy to do that, but it is something that we have to take seriously, and you can't just assume it's going to happen.
Well, let's not forget what this is for. It's for the kids. And it's ultimately for our students and doing what's best for them. And I think that's what this is all about. It's about student learning. Giving them the best education we can.
I think we all support the school, we're proud of the school, and we do everything to make it, excellent. But you have to stay on the bottom line. It can be afforded.
That's an individual.
Can we not afford it?
Yeah.
You can afford it.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say
There
that.
are people that cannot afford it.
Yeah.
And I must tell you, this is, bad news, but high tax actually drive away young people that want to live in Yellow Springs.
Well, that's not actually the case. When you look at the reality, when you look at school districts like Oakwood or other places that have high taxes, like in Cincinnati, there are a number of districts like Wyoming, Indian Hill, a lot of communities, Miramont, small communities like us that have very high education taxes, they have high property values as well. And they have a lot of young people living in those communities, and those are actually the strongest communities in most schools.
These people are the ones that can afford the taxes and the expenses houses. If we want to maintain our diversity, then we have to think about it.
So I think I go back to the comment about how we've made a lot of changes. We've done everything we can, I think, to cut our costs ultimately without significantly hurting our kids and their education. Any more cuts, I think, will have an effect on student learning in a way that I think will jeopardize what Yellow Springs Schools is all about. And so we don't come to this decision, the board doesn't come to this decision without really thinking deeply about it. And this was not a quick decision. This was a very difficult and challenging one for them to make. But they felt ultimately, in order to help our kids grow and learn and to make sure we maintain a quality school system, that this levy was critically important. So, but I totally understand what you're saying. I think that's you're making a great point. Everybody has to make their own choice. Thank you.
So considering that teachers have kind of borne the brunt of the cuts, if the levy passes, will the freezes be lifted, or will pay raises be enacted?
Well, teacher pay as well and support staff pay is all negotiated. And so we have negotiations scheduled again this year. And we'll find out what happens in negotiations. I mean, obviously we'll start somewhere and they'll start somewhere, and we'll ultimately see how that works out over time. But that's all negotiated, so I don't want to speculate what that will look like. I know that we will not do anything that's unreasonable. Clearly, we want to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible and sound, the whole way. At the same time, our teachers work very hard, and we have some great teachers, and they've taken cuts for several years. And if we want to retain and recruit the very best teachers around for our kids, we have to be competitive in terms of what we pay folks. And so I think that's important.
You do not want to fall behind in your salaries, because people, when they're interviewing several different places, and a lot of times it will come down to money. And I've worked in a district where our salary schedule very far behind our neighbors, and it was just detrimental. We had a terrible time trying to get good teachers because we were the lowest in the county. And when you're putting raises on a salary schedule, it takes a long time to claw your way up to even the bottom third in the area, or even half in the area. And I've lived it, and it's not worth it. We have to be very aware of what's going on around us and try to stay competitive. It's very important. I've built things in my 5-year forecast because I don't think we should build in absolute zero and expect that we will do nothing for 5 years. I think we have to be realistic.
Other questions? Yes.
Do you feel, since you guys have excelled so well, that you backed yourselves into a corner, that when you look around other districts that aren't meeting their goals, that aren't, schools of excellence, where there is plenty of money available to ones that aren't meeting, that are in risk?
I see what you're saying.
Do you think that the rest of the community doesn't realize that, these opportunities like,
Yeah, that's a good point.
like I know Xenia recently, has that, Dayton Public. You look at that and there's all these funds. Does the community, are they aware that you guys are at this level and there's not, they think, well, all these other places are getting all that money. Do you know, how do you broach that subject? Like, look, we're at the top because we're doing everything we can, and the state and, federal funds aren't available to give us because obviously what we're doing is right. And we've got that part. Whereas those funds, if you're at a school that's at risk, there's a lot more money available.
So that's a good point. And what she's talking about is that when you are it's often about a high poverty school district or a school district that is in significant academic watch or has significant problems academically, a lot of federal funds or state funds are flow to those districts to help support different programs to improve their student achievement. And so we don't get those funds, largely because we're not a high poverty district, but also because we are doing pretty well academically. But I do want to say about we're doing pretty good academically by the state metrics, but I think our expectations are to go above and beyond that. And really, we have some pretty lofty goals, I think, for ourselves long term. There's some areas that we definitely need to improve in, that we feel like we have to grow in, and we're going to continue to grow and get better and better. We feel like we want to be the best school district in the state of Ohio, and we think we're on our way there. It's going to take some time to get there, but we're working hard at it. Any other questions at all? Okay. Patty, do you have a question? Comment?
Vote for the levy.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I just say a very, very big thank you to Mario and Dawn. This scenario came together very quickly after a conversation with Aida and Sarah, and it tells me that it's been a very rich dialogue and conversation, and it's been interesting for me. I live in Yellow Springs, to hear the perspectives of people who do not live in Yellow Springs, and also to hear some of the very interesting perspectives and questions from some of our students who also are here studying but do not currently reside in Yellow Springs. So I think the rich dialogue and all the different stakeholder perspectives, I think, has been very much worthwhile doing this. And I hope that you guys, students here, think that it's been worthwhile also. But it's been to have a data-informed presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
A presentation that's actually informed by data goes so much further than just pulling up a few slides. So I think that was also great indeed. But I thank also everyone who came from the village today, and I hope that you thought that the evening was beneficial and helpful for you, and I've loved listening to your conversation. But thank you so much to the board and to Mario and Dawn. Thank you very much.